Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for the Jefferson Virtual Academy Forum this evening. My name is Shawn Dilly. I'm Deputy Superintendent for Instructional Support for the district. I have joining us this evening a number of our team members from the district office, and this evening we're going to kick off with Jennifer Rowan, Director of our Technology, Kelly Wolf, Acting Safety Director and leading our Jefferson Virtual School Academies, and Hans Fogel, who is our Public Information Officer, will be assisting us with managing the chat and facilitating the questions that you have. If you have any questions this evening, we're asking that you place them in the group chat so that we can try to best answer as many questions as possible. We anticipate many of you will have a lot of the same questions, so many of them we think will be answered throughout the presentation this evening. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Rowan, if you would go ahead and kick off your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It is so nice to see everybody. Getting ready to go back to school virtually or in person is very exciting, and we're so excited to share what we have for you this evening. Hopefully you can get a lot of your questions answered, and as Mr. Dilly and Mr. Vogel both said, we are here to answer your questions at the end for that question and answer session. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to share my screen now, and we have a presentation for you this evening. All right, can you see the Jefferson Virtual Academy Guardian information? All right, great. So first, what we're going to do is talk about each of the different options that are given to our Jefferson Virtual Academy students. The traditional, blended, Jefferson Virtual Academy, remote learning, and homeschooling. The next few slides will talk specifically about each of these areas. And I will be discussing this along with Kelly Wolf, who is our virtual learning director here. So Kelly, why don't you take it away with the traditional? Maybe she's having trouble with her microphone. Let me just talk a little bit more about the traditional. We have the in-person schooling with the new health and safety guidelines. This is what we normally know as traditional. You attend 5 days a week with a 1 hour shortened instructional workday for the safety protocols, the deep cleaning that has to take place due to COVID-19. And all of those students are eligible to participate in all available co-curricular and extracurricular activities, just like normal. The blended version is only for high school students only, and it is a very normal thing that we've done in the past. So this really isn't a big change. It's just maybe you're more aware of it because it's something that we're talking about a lot more. So the blended is a mixture of traditional and WV virtual schools and or college classes, dual enrollment, or just college courses. That means that students may not select individual classes to take in person versus virtually. Mix of traditional pathway blended with a WV virtual school and or college courses. So let me give you an example to help kind of make this more understandable. So if my child wanted to take Japanese, for instance, and Jefferson County doesn't have a Japanese teacher, then I could put them in the WV virtual school for that course, but they may be taking that course with a computer on site. Now, there are other situations, such as our dual enrollment and college courses. We always follow the institution guidelines through SU or WVU. What the institution is doing is what we will do, what we are going to do. So the students who normally go onto campus and have an early release, they may still have that early release, just like they would if the classes were physical. So that's sort of, we've had this in the past, but it may just become a little bit more confusing at this time. Jefferson Virtual Academy is what we're here to talk about today. This is our local JCS teachers using Google Classroom as their platform. The curriculum follows our pacing guides, and pacing guides are just, we have all these standards as teachers we have to follow, and we want to make sure that things are paced out correctly throughout the entire year. And our teachers are supposed to follow those pacing guides as closely as possible within reason, to help just pace out what's going to be learned to make sure we hit all of the standards. And both the traditional and the virtual academy will follow these pacing guides at the same type of level, because the idea is that the virtual academy and the traditional will kind of go right in parallel, so that if a child or a core group enters a quarantine period, they would be able to have the same type of educational experience. So the instruction is both a synchronous and asynchronous delivery. Synchronous delivery is just like what we're doing right now. Every single one of us, if we were in the physical sense, I'm in my office right now, but if I was with you in a room, we would be exchanging back and forth. That's synchronous at the same time. Asynchronous is when you do a text, when you text somebody and then they might get back to you later, or an email where you type an email and then they get back to you when they can. Asynchronous delivery in education, yes, that could be part of the communication, but it also could be a student hands in a paper and then they give feedback at a later time. So asynchronous and synchronous are both like techie terms, but you'll hear that again and again, and you'll see that on our sample schedule coming up. In the Virtual Academy, we also offer office hours with teachers, small group instruction, whole group instruction, and direct feedback. All of those are very important for our students to make sure that they have a strong foundation in their education. When you have a larger group of 20 and you get a chance to work in a smaller group of 3 or 4, you're going to get stronger feedback from your teacher, which is great. Students with disabilities will still continue to receive special education services online. English learners also receive continued support. Students continue to advance towards their JCS high school diploma. And of course, we have state assessments that we need to do. So those are part of the Virtual Academy. And all of these students are eligible for extracurriculars and co-curriculars, such as band after school. That means that we would prefer and expect that students who are in the Virtual Academy, they don't come to the school for like a band class in the middle of the day. And the reason why that is because we are trying to schedule all these students in what's called core groups, so that there's less transmission between groups. So we're going to try to minimize as much as possible any more exposure to people as necessary. So for the traditional sense, they're going to be in these core groups. We can't have somebody coming into a core group so that for exposure. So we want to make sure that we keep everyone safe. And in order to do that, we ask that anybody in the Jefferson Virtual Academy, they can participate in extracurriculars and co-curriculars. However, it would be after school opportunity. Homeschooling. Homeschooling is just done from home, and there's limited to no support from JCS. So there might have been a little confusion about the homeschooling and the virtual school right when all of this kind of happened. Virtual school is done with your local teacher, the person you're going to see in the grocery store when everybody else can go back to the grocery store like normal again. And, that's the person that's going to go to your kids' games when they play sports, and that's that local teacher. They're going to give you your curriculum. They're going to give you all of the things that you need. But in homeschooling, the caregivers are responsible for providing instruction and curriculum. And you have to choose what makes the most sense for your family. So homeschool curriculum must comply to WVA code 1881, and they are also eligible for public school extracurricular activities if enrolled in one public school virtual course. Remote learning. Remote learning is an in-person instruction stops and all students move online to online instruction. So this is sort of what happened in the spring when we all stopped and left school. We left school on, I think, March 13th, never to come back again. And then we started into this crisis teaching, which is very different than what we're talking about right here. But the remote teaching is when the in-person instruction is shut down and we need to switch. We need to switch from the classroom experience to the virtual experience. So we're already preparing for that at this time. So schools are shut down. Are you good? Okay. The schools are shut down, all instructions online, but again, we talked about those pacing guides a few slides back. Those pacing guides are going to be very key to make sure that as we start to leave a physical classroom and we go into the virtual classroom, that those things are happening very succinctly. We want to make sure that the transition between one and the other is as smooth as it possibly can be. JCS teachers are going to be on Google Classroom. The curriculum follows all the JCS pacing guides. The instruction will become a combination of synchronous and asynchronous delivery. There will be office hours. Everybody with students with disabilities will continue to receive services. English learners will receive continued support, and students continue to advance towards that high school diploma. And of course, we will have the state assessments as well. So remote learning looks a lot like the Jefferson Virtual Academy, and that's done by design so that there is not going to be an abrupt change from the classroom to the virtual environment. There are some quarantine situations where we are trying to think through some of the scenarios that may occur. The first one is if an individual student is out for quarantine. So for instance, if a student goes away for a weekend to go visit somebody and comes back and was exposed to COVID, and the doctor says you need to quarantine yourself for 14 days, then that student will be treated as a normal absence period. So if your student has gotten their tonsils out or has broken a leg and they've been out for an extended time period, that's going to be treated as the same as always. And students will make up the work with their teachers to complete those assignments. Now, if a core group goes home for quarantine, learning will continue remotely and shift to the Jefferson Virtual Academy schedule for the duration of the quarantine. We don't know much about the quarantine period because it's all kind of decided upon from the local health agencies and our governor, but we do know that every quarantine period will last at least 14 days. So we can assume that that's can happen at those times. So it's just something to think about as we move forward and how we're trying to minimize any disruption that students will have to their learning. Now, I believe Kelly's on here at this point, and I just wanted to know, Kelly, are you here?
Yes. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
I was having some technical difficulties and couldn't get unmuted. So I would first like to talk about what you should do if you are interested in choosing the virtual academy this year. Families should be prepared to support the students' participation in their online learning activities, ensure that the students have space to work. If you need a laptop or internet service, you can contact the school and we can help provide assistance with that. And just be ready to establish the daily learning schedule and work with the staff. There will be the standardized state test, and so we'll work with you to schedule those mandatory activities.
Speaking of families, we have two groups with us. The social emotional department, the SOMO department from central office is here to talk a little bit about their work, and also the cultural unity coordinator, Ms. Tanya Dallas-Lewis. So we're going to hear first from Dr. Ebersole, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say about social and emotional support.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you to share the good news about our social emotional support program for students and families. It's important to note that we really are committed to supporting children through meaningful relationships, as well as the adults who teach and guide them, most especially their caregivers. A significant part of our program is understanding that all of the services that we provide related to social emotional support apply equally as well to the virtual space as to the traditional learning environments in our classroom on campus. Let me have the next slide, please.
Yes.
Again, very important to know that, as I'd mentioned before, that this continuity of service, that school counselors, clinical social workers, school nurses, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, all of these services are provided. And it's very important that we will continue within the Jefferson Virtual Academy to make referrals, working with our community partners and other agencies to provide the necessary services that our children need to succeed at school as well as in life. Next slide, please. A major feature, of course, of our work is that we're always people first when it comes to social emotional work here in our schools. And we have plans to have a virtual school nurse who will be dedicated specifically to work with students who are participating in the Jefferson Virtual Academy through telehealth and other measures. They will also, again, be very important and central to our ability to create referrals for other services for children, because our nursing program not only supports the physical health of our children, which of course is paramount related to their safety during the pandemic, but also their social emotional well-being. It's important to keep in mind that our virtual school nurses will also be a primary educator who will share information with our families and children related to how to remain safe during the pandemic. And then the last slide, please. Again, a staff member that is essential to our social emotional team is our service options specialist. As you can tell, the acronym for this position is SOS. That is very important. We have a staff member, a member of our team, who is really here to support families and caregivers, both in the virtual space as well as in our traditional classrooms. They do serve as a primary point of contact for our families. You can reach out to the SOS, and they can provide direct services and also make referrals to the service providers within our schools. Again, it's very important. We want to make sure that our caregivers understand that whether their child is a member of the Jefferson Virtual Academy or actually attending our schools in person, that they will have access to all of the social emotional services we need for our children to stay healthy and to ensure their safe well-being and a happy future. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Ebersol. We're going to change gears a little bit here and talk to Miss Tanya Dallas-Lewis. If you could come on and talk to us about cultural unity.
All right, I am on. I don't know if you can hear me or see me. Let me know.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everybody. Happy evening to all of you. My name is Tanya Dallas-Lewis, and I am the Cultural Unity and Equity Coordinator, as well as the Staff Development Coordinator. And I'm here to just talk with you briefly about how we will be increasing our opportunities for learning partnerships. In support of our marginalized students, Jefferson County Schools looks forward to building upon strategies to increase awareness and response. So this is about how we respond to the diverse students' needs. And we are so excited about this now more than ever, as the COVID-19 has allowed us to have an even bigger eye on equity in all areas, especially when it comes to the children that we serve. And so this takes shape in a couple of ways. One is through cultural unity advocates. So each school will have a cultural unity diversity rep in the building in the form of a teacher, a staff person, whether they're a media specialist, teacher, assistant principal. They could be not just the students, but also the teachers. Support them how? Well, in learning how to understand differences in not only learning behaviors, but also in social interactions, because depending on your cultural background, that may or may not look different for you. And if it does look different for you, then that means that there are that we can honor and understand a variety of ways of knowing and showing that knowing when it comes to how instructionally leading our students and the way that they instructionally lead us as well. We also are excited about providing
think she dropped out there. But I will say that thank you very much, Ms. Tanya Dallas-Lewis. Very needed, and I just want to read this last part for her. This commitment will inform how JCS engages, motivates, supports, and prepares all students to achieve, thrive, and contribute in the global society. And what we call that is global dexterity. Thank you. Ms. Wolf, would you like to speak to changing between virtual and the traditional discussion and choice?
Certainly. We have had a question come up several times. If you choose virtual and decide that it really isn't your thing and you would prefer to switch back into the traditional setting, or vice versa, if you start with traditional and decide you'd rather switch to virtual, we do offer the opportunity to make that change at the end of the first semester. So around the 1st of December, we will ask if there are any changes in placement that would be preferred, and then we can adjust the teacher schedules and adjust the student schedules for the second semester.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. All right, let's talk more about the sample schedule considerations. And we are going to call this a sample schedule because it is just that, a sample of what you may see for this fall. There are certain terms in here that we realize that might not be common language for everybody. Morning meeting, brain breaks, stations, reset, well, obviously recess, integrated content, block scheduling, office hours, and teacher communication time, because a lot of this is new. It's new to all of us as virtual educators, as virtual school parents, caregivers, students. So it's good for us to know some of those common terms. So here's an example elementary school day. You'll see it's just kind of a idea of what the day could be. Around 8:30, wake up, get dressed, have breakfast, check Google Classroom. At that time, the teacher is having a communication time. What is that? Teachers need time to be able to set up meetings, to speak with parents, to talk to their administrators, to look at all of the different communication that comes to them. I say this because if you've worked remotely, I've started working remotely in March and now we're back in the office, but it takes a lot longer to do things in the virtual setting, such as setting up meetings. Now I can just go somewhere down the hallway with my mask on and I can say, hey, did you hear about this? But before it was setting up a meeting, or it was a longer email, or it was a phone call. So that teacher communication time is really important to make sure that everything works for the day. The morning meeting, so this is only an elementary school idea, and it's something that's always or very commonly done in an elementary school, and it's where the kids gather and just start their day right. And if they're in kindergarten, they might say what day of the week it is or what the weather is outside. But it's a way for us to foster community, and then really just orient them to what the lessons are going to be for that day. And also as a well-being check-in. The next thing are brain breaks. So we were very conscious to create these schedules. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of conversating about what's going to be good for students, what's not going to be good, and we're just continuously having those conversations. We are reaching out to others to see what they're doing at their schools. And, we decided to make sure that brain breaks were in the schedule. Just like a student in middle school or high school would change classes and they see friends in the hallway and they just say hello. And in the high school and middle school, that time is a lot less than 15 minutes. But we want the students to maintain a healthy relationship with technology, break away from the screen, and have a rest for their brain. We don't want the students on the screens for 6 hours a day. That's not healthy for anybody. But if they could have those breaks and then come back refreshed and renewed and ready for the next class, we want that to be a reality for them. For ELA stands for English Language Arts. that block will be both synchronous and asynchronous. So what that means is that the teacher will speak to them in a synchronous fashion, just like I'm speaking now, and then they will have activities that they do on their own, or maybe like with a small group, or just with extra help from the teacher where they get stuck. So those would be more of the extension activities, or in this case, asynchronous activities. And then of course they would have that station work. Stations are great for every type of classroom, but it works very well in the elementary space, especially for balanced literacy ideas. So we're looking at the small group with targeted instruction, word work, read to self, expository and informative writing, or informational writing, and all of that information, all of that work is done in the physical sense as well. So we're going to emulate that in the virtual. Now, science, social studies, or health, now this is only for the elementary school students. Those core content areas would be integrated in the ELA instruction. What that means is that we speak about science and social studies or health within the context of a story, in their writing, so they're doing something with it. It emulates real world work. So the example I gave yesterday is we don't, as adults, we don't have, okay, it's math time, so I'm going to learn about math during this time. We don't do that as adults. What we do as adults is we balance our checkbook, or we, you know, I'm writing up quotes for all kinds of things right now. You know, that's how we do math. So if we're looking at that in the science and social studies and health, and kind of talking about that in a integrated sense, you learn things more holistically that way. So it's exciting to see that as part of our focus here. Lunch and recess, that will provide some time for office hours as well, and recess would be on their own. And we love it when students play. We miss students very much. The office hours is when students and or caregivers can sign up for times with the teacher. So if there's additional needs that need to be met from the teacher or from the student, maybe they don't understand a video that the teacher put out there, or they watched the lesson after it wasn't a synchronous situation, it was an asynchronous situation, and they just couldn't understand some of the ideas. Getting that one-on-one help is really key for making this work. And again, it goes back to that relationship piece between the local teacher and the student. This is the other slide for the example elementary day. So you can see we do have art, music, PE, library specials at the end of the day. And the teacher planning time is the same exact time as we will have it in the physical sense at the end of the day. Now here's the sample secondary, middle, and high school. You'll see it's quite different, and it talks about A and B days. So if you've noticed on our re-entry documents for going back into the school building, you'll see that we're changing this to a block schedule for temporary for this year, which means that you'll have 4 periods per day. So when I went to high school, for instance, I had 4 periods a day, and then I would have periods 1, 3, 5, 7 for day A. And then day B would be all of my even classes, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then I also taught, when I taught, I also taught in block scheduling. I've taught both schedules, but it's the same exact thing. And what that does, it's going to limit the amount of screen time. So if you can think, we have a half hour of asynchronous per class, and we had 8 classes to get through. That's like 4 hours of continuously being online. So what we decided to do was take a look at what we were thinking about in the physical and what health regulations and safeties we have there in the middle and high school, and then also emulating that in the secondary virtual school. So you have the A days and you have the B days. And that helps with a lot of those brain breaks and allows for continuous work on that topic throughout the day. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who's going to talk more about attendance.
Okay. One of the things about the spring, students were given that option of completing work or not completing work or just getting teacher feedback, and they weren't required to log in every day. But this is going to be very different. It is more tailored to the traditional setting. So attendance does matter. Students are expected to participate regularly. They do have the ability to pace their own learning, but we are encouraging them to participate in the synchronous activities with their class teacher so that they are getting that same environment that they would be in the building. So the students will be monitored in 5-day increments, and attendance will follow the traditional school policy as close as possible. So if the teacher realizes that the student has not logged on, they haven't participated in any of the activities, they haven't heard from them, and it has been several days, then a student assistance team will be assembled and will meet with the parents and the students and talk about a plan to help increase student attendance and participation. And after 10 inactive instructional days, the student and the caregiver will be referred to the attendance director. In terms of grading, the Virtual Academy students will be given the same report card that the traditional students receive. So every 9 weeks, they will get their quarterly grades. Unlike the spring crisis teaching, the students will receive the grades on all of their assignments, and they are expected to maintain passing grades in order to advance to the next grade level or to graduate.
Okay, so we also got some feedback that we would like to show you Google Classroom from the student point of view. Let me just show you. It's a brand new day, and I'm going into my classroom. So I'm going to search for Google Classroom. So this is going to be a little demonstration on what you can expect to help, how to help your student. Just go into Google Classroom. If this is the first time logging in for the day, you will be asked to log in with the JCSWV Google EDU account. And I'm just going to show you my sample classroom. But before I get there, this is called a dashboard. And on the dashboard, you'll see cards for each of the classes. So you can see how many classes I have. There are 2 ways to enter into the Google Classroom for the first time. The first one is by clicking the Add button in the upper right-hand corner, and it'll just say Join Class. And there's going to be a class code that your teacher provides, and you just put the class code and you'll be entered into the class. The second way would be like this card here. It has this accept. This is where the teacher direct added me, and I can just click accept and go right into the class. Over on the left-hand side, there's a navigation tool. We call this the hamburger in EdTech, and you can kind of toggle between all of the different courses. So you can see I'm teaching some courses up here, and I'm also enrolled in classes here. The students will only have this section for the enrolled. All right, so let me show you what a sample classroom looks like. Ms. Hillman made this one for me, and everything works on tabs. So you have the stream tab, you have the classwork tab, and you have the people tab. The stream works, just tells you a little bit of what has been happening in the class, and then there's also ways for you or the student to comment. So welcome to our Google Classroom. Thank you. And just send that right off. And you can see that's the class comment. Now, some teachers may opt to have that on, some teachers may opt to have that off. It depends on the situation. The second tab is classwork. This is going to be the most important tab for your student. So you see on the left-hand side, there are topics, and that helps with organization. So you can just click on the topic and it'll give you that exact one. Here's all topics. And then all of these little the circles mean something to me when I look at them. So this one here looks like a bookmark, and it's what's called material. So those are things that you need to read, watch. That's basically the material that you'll have for your lesson. This round button here is an assignment. So you click over here. In fact, this one is a quiz. And here's a quiz that you can take. I don't know if you've ever read Tuck Everlasting or watched the movie, but it is a very good book. Okay, this one here with the question mark, Let me just show you what this looks like. And I've already turned it in from yesterday's, but there's a place here where you can turn it in. You can add a private comment to your teacher, or you can add a comment to the class. Obviously, maybe you would answer it much better answer than mine. You can see your classmates' answers, and they can reply to their classmates. That's a very normal thing to do in a classroom, is to get feedback from a student, and then peer-to-peer interaction where they may say something and the student may reply to 2 of their classmates as an asynchronous discussion. Okay, go back to my sample classrooms, classwork. Okay, and this looks like this is already turned in. I turned it in yesterday, so I just click up here, view assignment, and I can unsubmit it. I'm going to unsubmit. And this is my spelling practice. So you just click in what your spelling assignment is, and there would be directions and things. This is just more for a demonstration today. And then after you are finished, the student would mark it as done, or they could add and create from their Google Drive here. Just mark is done, all finished. All right, so that's the classwork stream. The people tab just has the teachers and maybe your classmates here. Make sure that you do not use this email thing here. We do have ways for you to communicate with your teachers through the Microsoft email system. So try to use that one. Okay. All right. Now, if I was a parent in this situation, these are the 2 top things that you want to know about, though. Click on the hamburger. Here's your calendar. Your calendar can give you all of the classes at advance or at a bird's eye view, or you can drill down into each class. Here you will see the assignments that are due for each of the days. So you can see I have 2 assignments that are due here. If I click on the calendar again and click on the to do, you'll see there is, I can see all of the classes, or I can just see specific ones. Here you can see what's missing. So as you can see, this was due March 31st, and I have not completed this yet. And then I can also see what's due coming up. And each of the classes have a different color. So if I go to all classes, this netiquette must be in pre-K. One of my classes there. I can also look at those that I've already done. See, I just put in spelling practice, so I turned it in. I can turn that right there. So again, that's at the hamburger, the calendars here, and the to-do are your go-to tools. And how you can look for that and how you can find it is by sitting down with your students and asking them to review that. And now that you have your I like to call the secrets of Google Classroom, you can say, hey, just, look at your to-do and let me see what's going on. Let me see what you've done. That's going to really help you as you ask your students what they're doing. All right, so I'm sorry, I realized that my camera is over here and I'm looking over here. I have 2 screens going on, and I just got right into that Google breakdown. So let me just bring this back up. I'm sharing my screen. And we also wanted to make sure that you know where there's information about the demonstration that you saw tonight. We also put this up in March during the pandemic when it first started, where you can find directions on how to sign into Google Classroom in both English and Spanish, how to join Google Classroom with a code or an invitation. There are videos here. Michelle Cantley, one of our wonderful coaches, made some videos for parents, and they're very short. They're 2 minutes long. The longest one is about 4 minutes. So these are really great resources, and that's on our Jefferson County Schools page. All right. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation. We are now going to take questions and provide some answers for you. We appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good evening, everybody. My name is Hans Vogel. I'm the Public Information Officer for Jefferson County Schools, and I have been doing my best to field and organize and consolidate some of the questions that have been coming in. There's a lot to get to, and I want to be respectful of your time. We should have a good amount that we can cover tonight, and everything that we're unable to cover, I encourage you to check out our website. I've shared a couple of links already in the chat. You can go back through, and I'll share some more as we go. But we are working right now on what I would call a living document. It is a Jefferson County Schools Family FAQ. All of the questions that have been submitted to us, we've been answering and updating on an almost weekly basis to try and keep up with all of the questions that continue to pop up. We are very grateful for your support and patience as we all try to put this together, because there is, as you can imagine, a lot of ground to cover, and we could not do this without your support. I would say one of the most frequent questions I have seen this evening, and I know Mr. Dilly is going to help me answer most of these, but it has to do with bands and extracurriculars. And that's not just after school co-curriculars and extracurriculars like sports or marching band, but there's a lot of questions about how students who maybe choose the Jefferson Virtual Academy would be able to participate in jazz band or chorus or something like that, especially if they wanted to be part of the performances. Make sure Shawn is unmuted.
Thank
There we
you,
go.
Mr. Fogel. I was unable to respond quickly there due to the
That's
unmuting.
my fault.
But as far as what courses and things are going to be available, a lot of that's going to depend upon how many students are selecting virtual versus the in-person classroom experience. And so what we're going to try to do is make sure that we can offer as many of those opportunities as we possibly can. Some of those will be limited due to the types of classes and things that are available at this time, but we are trying to create as many virtual options for folks. And as was stated earlier surrounding the extracurricular and curricular or co-curricular events, basically you'll be able to participate virtually if you choose a virtual option for the coursework, and then you would be able to participate in the events after school hours to participate in marching band or some of the other chorus and some of the other options that are out there and available.
Thank you. I know that that's a big concern a lot of folks have. Another one is how students who are in the Jefferson Virtual Academy will remain connected to their classmates who might choose traditional. Are there going to be any crossover events that principals might choose to hold to keep their school communities united?
And that's a great question. Crossover events right now would be probably not an occurrence because it would be against the advisement of the West Virginia Department of Ed, the CDC guidelines. However, as things begin to shift or change in our circumstances in our communities, we obviously would want to try to promote and create that opportunity. But as of right now, we would be very limited just because of the health and safety guidelines that we're being asked to follow.
Shawn, there's a few questions about what classes would be offered virtually versus what would be offered in person. And I think some talk about how that is mixing in with blended options. Can you clarify what blended learning is going to look like? And then talk about what classes would be available for Jefferson Virtual Academy versus traditional?
Yes, blended is an opportunity for our high school students only. Blended is something that we have been supporting in our traditional classrooms for several years now, and that is taking a combination of our in-person classes at the high school with the combination of our higher ed institutions and partners, along with the potential for some West Virginia virtual classes. So those same options would be available for a JCS virtual student that is needing some of those opportunities. But again, one of the primary goals that we have is as many classes as possible are going to be taught by our Jefferson County staff, because we know that that is one of the most meaningful and helpful and productive instructional opportunities for our students.
And for folks who looked at that schedule, and I have shared a link to our website that details some of the things that Jennifer and Kelly went over, but there is going to be, I think, some opportunity for, once we get our feet under us, some creativity in terms of having some school community-based virtual connection with our students. I've heard some principals toy with the idea of, maybe a lunch where you get all of them together online and do some things like that. So I know that there is talk already of doing that. Jennifer, this is one for you because it has to do with, first of all, will the Google Classroom and our other materials and tools that we'll be using be friendly with Macintosh computers and as Apple products? And what happens if there is an issue with Google Classroom that interferes with the student's ability to turn in their work? I'll mute you there.
Oh, those are very great questions. So everything that Google Classroom has to offer is web-based. So anything with an internet connection will work with Google Classroom. The second question is interesting. So can you say that again? Is it just if it doesn't work?
I think specifically what this question had to do with was that in the spring during the sort of emergency response learning, there were some issues once in a while with uploading assignments to Google Classroom that might have caused a late entry on an assignment. If that's encountered, is there going to be any support for parents in terms of technical issues?
Yes, absolutely. And you should always start with the classroom teacher. Anytime that there are issues, they normally will either put in a help desk ticket or they will contact me or contact their coach. Those supports are going to be in place for teachers so that should this issue occur, we can make sure that it has a swift resolution.
And this was something that came up yesterday as we spoke as well. And Shawn, this will probably go back to you, but there is some concern about how teachers are either going to juggle double caseloads or if we're going to have to hire a whole lot of new teachers to do virtual academy. I'll let you speak to how we are very, very cognizant of the workload that comes with both virtual and traditional in-person learning, and that we are not going to burden teachers with an unrealistic workload that would make students suffer. And also we are going to be utilizing our own teachers for virtual once we have a better idea of our count.
Yes, that's correct. The count's going to make a lot of the difference or determination about where we support students at this time. And so what we are not going to be asking teachers is to have a certain percentage of students at any one time in their classroom and then have some on virtual. Basically, a teacher will be teaching a class with either completely virtual or they'll be teaching completely in person. And so we won't be mixing those two. We're going to do our best to try to help make sure that our teachers are teaching one way, completely virtual or all in person. But there will be those times where they may have a combination depending on the courses. For example, if you're a biology teacher and you're teaching 4 biology classes, you may be asked to teach 3 in-person biology classes, but 1 virtual class. Now, again, we're going to hopefully try to avoid that as much as possible, but we anticipate that, all of our teachers were supported by, all of our students were supported by the teachers that we had in-house last year. And so we will just be reorganizing them in a way to try to support our students. And if we run into some unique situations and things that limit our ability to cover, just like we would do now, we would look at West Virginia virtual schools and some of the other options that are available to us to support students in that way.
And one of the things I'll point out there with what you just said, Shawn, is it's not 4 classes in person and then another 4 classes virtual. It's taking the same workload, but maybe delivering it in different ways based on student need.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely want to try to limit and understand the value of trying to make sure our teachers aren't overburdened with the task of trying to manage these. But again, that'll be something we will be working with teachers directly on and making sure they're comfortable in supporting anything that we are asking them to do.
There's been a number of questions pop up about core groups and how those will be determined at different grade levels. Can you speak to that?
Well, elementary, obviously, I think is one of the simpler understandings as far as core groups are concerned. That's based on their individual student classrooms. It gets a little more complex when you get into the middle and high school, based on what's the schools are trying to do is trying to limit the amount of movement that those students will be doing in person. So for some of the things that they will be doing will be obviously moving to a 4-period day. Part of the reason we chose a 4-period day is there's only, it limits the number of transitions that they're actually going in the hallway to different classrooms. In some cases, teachers will actually be doing the movement from one classroom to the other, and the kids will be staying in place. In other situations, they're going to be moving just to the classroom next door. So there's lots of solutions, and it's going to vary a lot between school to school and from which class they chose. The biggest priority we had is we wanted to try to make sure we set up the most safe and productive environment, but tried to limit the amount of movement that's going to occur. And one of those decisions that in the beginning of the year that we're going to start out with in limiting movement is having students that will go to the lunchroom to pick up their cafeteria trays and then report back to their classroom to eat their lunches. And hopefully as restrictions lift, that guidance will change, but that's where we're at right now in maintaining safety to the utmost for our kids at this time.
Can we talk some, Shawn, about masks, when those will need to be worn and how that will be enforced?
Well, obviously, one of our strong recommendations and the recommendations that we're receiving from our health officials and the CDC is wearing masks as much as possible. And so one of the things we are mandating masks to be worn in our public areas, such as hallways, cafeterias, areas where there's multiple groups of folks. We do strongly encourage that they be worn in the classrooms and other places. But again, we also know, depending on the age level and their abilities to do that, we will work with kids as much as possible and try to help communicate and educate families and caregivers about any concerns related to health and safety concerns. But we know that this is one of the most important ways that we can help keep kids safe and protected at this time.
What happens if Governor Justice pushes the state to remote learning for traditional students, and what happens to students who've already chosen Jefferson Virtual Academy? What changes for both groups?
Great question. And what's going to be happening for the Jefferson Virtual Academy is essentially they're just going to keep moving as if nothing has changed. And so it's going to be a very smooth transition. One of the things that we are going to be asking our in-person teachers to be doing is starting the year out with Google Classroom and helping support our students learning that platform and navigating that platform. So in the event of a quarantine, or if the governor declares a remote learning opportunity, that they will be able to move to the virtual environment, mirroring much of what would be happening in the virtual academy model, and would shift to similar approaches that we're seeing in those environments. So teachers are going to be receiving training on that preparation, because we know there's a real possibility that we could be shut down at any point. And we want to make sure that that transition is as smooth as possible, and that continuity between what's happening in the in-person versus the virtual environment are very similar.
I'm going to send another question to Jennifer Owen, our Director of Technology. We had a couple of people ask about the process for requesting equipment if they need assistance from the school system to get that. And then some other parents and families who are asking for any advice you have on what type of device they should invest in. And then we'll of course be sharing all that on our website once it's formalized. But can you offer any insight this evening, Jennifer? If I can unmute you. All these technical difficulties are 100% me, folks.
That's okay. You know, it's all part of this. So yes, I can absolutely share information about that. And it's a very good question. When you sign up for Jefferson Virtual Academy, you will be asked a series of questions. And one of those questions is your device need. So if you need a device, make sure on your registration you indicate that, so we can get the correct count and make sure that we give you a Chromebook. We are getting a Lenovo's 100E Chromebooks. They are very difficult to find right now. I've been talking to some parents that that have been asking, when we have ordered it, but it's not supposed to come until September. You know, just please ask us for one. You know, it's okay to ask us for one, because it's very difficult to find one before the beginning of school year, and we don't want you to go without it. If you are in a household that has more than one child and you're sharing a device and you choose virtual, well, they both should have a device so that they can access their education. And so we are prepared to help you with that request.
Great.
Well, let me go ahead and just add to that, just so folks are a little more clear, perhaps, in the sense that ultimately, if you're wanting to choose something for your child and to have on their own, that's perfectly acceptable. And depending on the grade level, what we would just recommend is a laptop, something with a keyboard that is accessible. Now, if you're getting below second grade into kindergarten and those realms, you might want to consider more of a tablet, something a little less that doesn't require the same level of fine motor requirements as far as handling and manipulating that device. But again, we can definitely support you. One of the things that we are actively doing is trying to support those families that have the greatest need right now. We are trying to work towards a one-to-one initiative in the district, but obviously that's a very expensive amount of money to try to make sure that every single student has a device. And I'm happy to announce that we have been pursuing grant funds, and we were just recently received a grant for $450,000 to purchase additional equipment for the district and for our students. So we're excited about that. We know that that's going to take a little bit of time to get devices because pretty much everybody's asking for devices all over the United States currently. And so we're excited about offering that opportunity, but we will continue to try to support students, whether you're in person or virtually.
We're having some questions from families about teacher assignments. If a child chooses to go to Jefferson Virtual Academy versus traditional, or if we make a change in the middle of the year due to an increase in our order from the governor, will they maintain their same teacher when they move over to a virtual platform?
If we go to remote learning, that declaration is made, they will move over and their current teacher, in-person teacher, would be assigned to them virtually. So they would not shift. The only time that you may see a possible shift is if you elect at the semester to change from one platform to the other. If you're, say, for example, wanting to move from, you try out the virtual to start the year and you don't feel that it's working as well as you'd like, and you'd like to move to at the semester to in January to the in-person, you may not have the same teacher at that time. Again, we're hoping that we will be able to do as best we can to maintain that same, but there's the chance that that may not happen. So I just want to be open and upfront about that. But again, we do want to try to promote that continuity as best we can. But if you make that shift at the semester, it may not be a reality.
Will there be teachers teaching as part of the Jefferson Virtual Academy from all the schools in our system? Will everyone be represented?
With the current numbers that we're seeing, we do anticipate representation from all of our schools. Some schools may obviously be a little more representative depending on the number of students from that school that request the virtual option versus the in-person option. So as much as we're trying to do, we want to try to keep as many of our teachers that are signed with that school working with their kids.
We've talked a lot about synchronous or live face-to-face, virtual learning versus the asynchronous. A lot of concerns out there from parents who maybe will not be able to sit down with a student and get them started or monitor their work, or maybe they simply won't have access to the internet during the day. What are the options for those parents and those families if they choose to do the Jefferson Virtual Academy?
And that's a great question. And that's something that we've contemplated heavily, and we want to make sure that we're supporting our families. So one of the things we'll be asking our teachers to do as they're providing that synchronous direct contact with students during the ones that can participate is record that and upload that and make that available for teachers at the end of the day. And also, families could still also schedule some office hour time to help work through assignments and help their students in that regard, because we understand not all family situations are the same. And some families have to work throughout the day and aren't able to provide that direct instruction or support at that time. So we are planning to have that recorded feed for folks so they can make sure that they can see the instructional part too. So that way they can learn it along with their kids.
And that's also a very big part of why there are designated office hours for the teachers to be able to make up some of that lost time when it happens, because we know schedules aren't even necessarily the same day to day. So A lot of thought has gone into this. I know because I've revised some of the working plans over and over again because this team has been incredible. Questions about James Rumsey? Do we know anything at this point, Shawn, about the students who might be attending classes there?
Yes, we're still working through that. James Rumsey has a very unique challenge, as you can imagine, because they service 3 different districts, and all 3 districts have very different schedules, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. And we are working with them to ensure that students do have availability of the coursework there, as well as a response if we should be designated to go to remote learning. They'll have some virtual options, but largely the challenge with James Rumsey is a lot of that curriculum requires a lot of hands-on opportunities. And so even if we do go remote, they are working on some opportunities that some of that hands-on work could occur afterwards. Some of those details are still being worked out, but they're going to be doing, from what I can tell, everything they can to support and ensure our kids are being successful and achieving the certifications and requirements to meet many of their goals in those programs.
Will students still be able to pursue AP and honors courses, and maybe at other levels if they were supposed to take a grade level above in a math or an ELA class, will they still have that opportunity if they choose Jefferson Virtual Academy?
Yes, they will. And basically, students will be available to will have honors courses available to them, as well as AP college courses. Those will all be available. And in most cases, those will be, in the majority of cases, will be taught by Jefferson Virtual Academy teacher. So it'll be one of our own staff leading that instruction. I will share there is the caveat if you should take something like a very unique course, an AP course that maybe perhaps isn't traditionally taught, that would most likely be led through the West Virginia Virtual School. But that's something that could happen in the in-person environment. For example, if you were to take a AP physics course or something like that, and you would be the only student enrolled in that, we do want to make sure that they still have those opportunities. They may just come in a different form than some of the other options.
We've talked about school-issued devices. We know that textbooks will still be part of the learning process, even for those who choose Jefferson Virtual Academy. Do we know yet how those materials will be distributed for students?
We're still working out the details a little bit on that, but what we're anticipating is that after we kind of get through the 19th, when the registration closes and we can make the determination of the number of students participating in our virtual academy, we will be setting up a pickup date where students can pick up their textbooks, different materials, as well as any potential technical device, or excuse me, laptops or devices that they may need to pick up at that time. So those details should be coming out before too long, but we're kind of waiting, and a large part of that will be handled by their virtual teachers.
We've got some recurring concerns about those families who choose Jefferson Virtual Academy and making sure that students are keeping up. What are the benchmarks or milestones? How is that going to be evaluated? Just what do we have in place now to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks?
One of the things that was mentioned earlier is obviously the requirement for attendance. And so there'll be some check marks in that regard, and making sure that that students are logging in and checking on their work, and that they're making adequate progress. But just like in a traditional classroom, teachers should be anticipating or expecting to see assignments completed during certain windows of time, just like they would. And so we're encouraging teachers to, obviously, if there's problems, reach out to families, make available resources if there's roadblocks to that, and even having a student assistant teams meeting if necessary to try to help plan and work around any obstacles that may be occurring. So we'll definitely plug into some of our resources that were mentioned earlier if necessary by the social emotional department, and make sure that we can continue to support students no matter what the obstacle may be.
And circling back to another question that had come up, for those who are really not going to be able to do a lot of the synchronous learning, as Mr. Dilly just said, the teachers will still be able to see the work, make sure that the students are interacting, watching the videos and checking it. And Ms. Rowan may be able to speak a bit more to how parents can utilize some of these tools as well to interact with their student and check on their progress.
Yes, so 2 of the things that you really want to make sure that when you do get a chance to sit down with your student is to look at that to-do list and the calendar. Those are going to give you bird's eye views of all of the work that needs to be completed. You will see what they are missing, what they have completed, and what they are going to complete in the future. So those are really great tools for you to kind of stay involved in there. And then always be in touch with the teacher. You can email that teacher. They have communication time right in their schedule, so they are there for you to help everybody through this process.
Yeah, and I would just encourage, excuse me, just that you use the teacher's official email, or you can use live grades. We will be supporting live grades again, and many of you out there are comfortable with live grades and been using live grades, and that will continue. And you'll see much of the same level of communication and ability to determine what your child's progress is by examining what's happening in live grades.
If a family chooses Jefferson Virtual Academy or in person, and after a few weeks decides that that wasn't the best choice for them, when is their first opportunity to be able to make another decision?
Well, obviously, our number one goal is to make sure students are successful in whichever path they choose. And we are strongly encouraging folks to try to stay to the semester just because it requires us to navigate the resources and the staff that we have. But we will work with families that are having difficulties, and we will work through a process called our student assistance team, made up of our school principals, our guidance counselors, or school counselors, excuse me, as well as some of the staff involved. And we can talk about where those challenges and issues are to see what's the right choice is moving forward. But we are encouraging folks to try to really think through that and make sure that they're comfortable for at least looking at a semester.
We've talked a bit about kindergarten and elementary and middle and high school. Do we have any information at this point on pre-K?
We do. I'm not sure if Mary Lynn is on here this evening.
I think she's even unmuted. Sure, there she is.
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Sure, what would you like to know? I can start with pre-K is not going to be offered virtually. Because pre-K is an optional program, we are not offering it virtually. However, if we do go remote by the governor's order, students will be receiving some support and some activities to be doing at home with the teacher through the app Seesaw, as we did in the spring.
Great. And any other news in terms of pre-K this year that parents or families need to be aware of?
Sure, yes. Parents have been waiting for their letters to be coming in the mail to see where their placement for their children are going to be. So those letters are coming out. They were mailed today, and we will be following a re-entry plan for the first 9 weeks that has the children coming 2 days a week with 3 days doing those virtual activities and support at home. And that is all explained in the letters that are coming out this week, Hans.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dilly, can you talk to us about what happens with before and after care this year? That's a big concern for working families.
Yes, we have been working and communicating with a number of our child care partners and trying to see what options we have available to us. And we have going to try to continue as much of that support as we can. Part of the challenge we do have, we just have to be upfront about, is companies do have the same health and safety regulations that we do. So it may limit the number of students that they can accept. But we do have many of those programs scheduled to be after school this year to try to continue supporting as many families as we can. So we'll continue to evolve that program as our regulations change. But right now, with the pretty strict guidance, they're going to be limited to the number of students they can support at any one time. But we do have all of those in place and ready to go for the fall.
Thank you. Questions about IEPs and services such as reading help or speech, are those still going to be available through Jefferson Virtual Academy?
Yes, absolutely. The IEP is something that's going to be continued to be looked at and reviewed. Obviously, some of the things that we have to look at is it may not look exactly the same or work the same, but that's something that our special education caseworkers and staff will be reaching out to families and students to try to assist them in making any modifications that would better suit them in a virtual environment versus that in-person environment. So they will be still receiving services, and they just might be modified slightly to be a bit more effective in the virtual environment versus what they've traditionally seen in the in-person, but they will still be receiving services.
Do families that might need to get some technical equipment, laptop or devices for their students, should we go to a remote learning by order of the governor, need to take steps now to get that, or can they wait until a potential order comes?
They could wait a little bit. We are making preparations for the event that if you're a family that's in need, but you've gone ahead and made the selection of going in person and we should go to a remote, we are working on plans and preparations to have a stockpile of devices available for our neediest families to make sure that if they go, if the designation of remote occurs, they will be walking out the door with the devices that they need to help ensure that they can continue their education.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Rowan?
Thank you, Mr. Dilly. That was absolutely perfect. And I just wanted to add that we were having conversations about that today. How do we ensure that those students who if we would go on remote, have what they need? So fabulous question, and Mr. Dilly really did a great job answering it.
We've got some questions about communication. Some folks are better communicators than others. That goes for all walks of life. Some people are concerned that maybe the communication won't be fantastic. Can we talk about some of the staff development we're doing to make sure that teachers know that doing Jefferson Virtual Academy might not be business as usual for what they've been doing in a traditional classroom?
Yes, I'll speak to the professional development piece because myself, Kelly, the coordinators, Mr. Dilly, we've all been working very hard on a 3-day professional development experience for our teachers so that no matter if they're in person or they are a virtual academy teacher, both of them will understand what is necessary for proper communication. One of those is we are expecting that if a teacher emails within the workday and that teacher is working that day, that it would be returned within that workday or within 24 hours. That's an expectation that we're going to have for communication. It's extremely important and a very valuable element when it comes to a virtual learning academy, one that we really truly value. So I would say that part of this experience is going to be focused on communication and our expectations from the county level as to how we can support teachers communicating with parents as best as possible.
And of course, because these are still Jefferson County Schools teachers, even if they're teaching on a remote platform, they are still our teachers. They do still interact with our principals and our central office staff. So all of us will be working together to ensure adequate communication and instruction for students.
And just a point of clarification there, I think since you alluded to something a little bit there, just to help the families out there listening, is if you're traditionally, for example, a Charlestown Middle School student and you go to the Jefferson Virtual Academy, you're still a Charlestown Middle School student. So you'll still be reporting to the same building as far as the principal and the administration there, and the school counselors will be there to support you, whether you're in person or in the virtual environment. So we just want to make sure that's clear as well, so that our families know who to reach out to for help and support.
And I know Dr. Ebersol's on this call as well, and he spoke about somebody who's new to our district, the SOS, and perhaps he can shed some light on that position as well. Oh, you went back to muted.
Probably my fault again.
There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to share with our caregivers and other stakeholders who are on the call this evening about our SOS. We just feel it's so important when there are multiple questions that you have about how your child is, the experiences they're having, and there's always a kind of a question that you might have that is not necessarily easily answered. And by having this service options specialist available to us, she will be able to carefully listen. She's especially trained at listening carefully to people and understanding their problems and offering solutions. That's the big idea. And so in a variety of circumstances, she will actually, our SOS will be actually to provide you an instant solution. She'll say, this is your own private sort of Zoom conversation with her, where she will be able to provide a definitive answer to the question or concern that you have. Other times, she will be making a referral to another service provider within our school system who's more able equipped to offer the kind of service that your child needs. So we're very excited to offer this opportunity. We are going to go online with it very soon. It will certainly be in place when our students return to school, and we're already working with this person. She's actually in sort of going right now through a training experience with us, getting to know our schools and certainly our central office and how she can best support our families. But we're very excited about bringing this position because, again, when you want to know who to call, it'd be very easy that you'll have one point of contact who can then immediately address your concerns. And we really want that to be part of our experience for all our children and families with Jefferson County Schools, most especially perhaps as part of this Jefferson Virtual Academy. Thank you.
Do we anticipate that students in Jefferson Virtual Academy will be about on pace with students in the traditional setting? And that becomes especially important if a family chooses to make a change after the first semester. Are we expecting them to be on the same lessons at the same time and have a lot of the same assignments?
Just like in our traditional classrooms, there's going to be some elements that are unique, and because we want to make sure that our teachers are able to support their innovation and creativity within the classroom. But we are asking teachers to follow our pacing guides, which will try to keep them along the same benchmarks along the way so that they're meeting the same standards and covering the same content. They may be just approaching it with different assignments and different instructional strategies, but we are anticipating or asking that those folks try to keep that as continuous as possible so that if things happen to change or there's need or demand, that there'll be very minimal disruption between a student, no matter which platform they land on or have to work through.
It's a question that's come up as well for those families who might have children in multiple grades. Are the schedules going to sync up pretty well so that they could do synchronous learning simultaneously for, say, a middle school student and a couple of elementary school students in the same household?
Yes, the sample schedules that we've shared with you all are something that we are kind of endorsing as a rough template. Obviously, we want to allow teachers to have some flexibility, and there may be need to do that for some scheduling things. For example, I know some of our band folks are working on some later afternoon things so that can make a smoother transition to the extracurricular after school situation and help support that. So there's some minor changes like that, but all in all, we're hoping to try to use those templates to really guide a little bit of what we're doing so that there's some continuity as you suggested with what's happening with multiple school age children in the household so that parents can have that support all at the same time and they'd be engaged. And that's part of why we're also targeting those families with needs of devices. If they need more than one device in the household, that's definitely something we want to try to support so we can ensure their success.
Quite a few questions about how the school year starts for Virtual Academy in terms of not only logistically, because traditional students are going to be doing that sort of modified schedule for the first 2 weeks. So what's virtual doing while their classmates may not be in the classroom, but also meet the teacher oriented to school. Are we still anticipating that schools will have some informational sessions for both sets of students?
Yeah, we are asking schools to hopefully get some informational sessions put together for their students. The Jefferson Virtual Academy will look a little bit differently, obviously, because the barriers of learning the new health and safety guidance are not there. So students will start off the school year and obviously be spending some time learning about the platform, how to submit assignments and go through some of the logistics there, and just interacting with their peers and some of the expectations. And then they'll be continuing to move right into schoolwork just as we would expect them to. The in-person situation, part of the staggering would be to help all the students learn all of the protocols, and also to ensure that the safety and health protocols that we put in place will adequately meet the needs that we have for our school students community. However, even those that are in person would also be provided when the days they're not in school with some expectations for some instructional work on those days that they're not in the building. So both of them should be working pretty much every day that they're not in schools. So
Terrific. We've talked a lot about band and those classes in the high school, middle school level. Can you tell us about what specials will look like at the elementary school level? A lot of questions surrounding physical education, but also art and music, and how those will be different this year in person and virtually.
right, the in-person that will occur very similar to the traditional way that we've done and supplied those with our teachers coming in and supporting them. One of the changes that you will see to promote some of the health and safety guidance is that those special teachers will be reporting to a classroom. The students won't actually be leaving their regular classroom. They'll be staying in the classroom. The virtual environment will look a little bit different in the sense that those teachers will be working with them, and it may also be provided by some of their own elementary teachers with the support of their specials teachers. But we are still planning to ensure that each student, whether in grade levels, will have all of the art, music, PE, and library. So that they'll still continue to get that experience. PE is one of those things that's a little bit differently, but again, some of that may be cast off as independent work and have them doing things in the family. And that's where some of the caregivers are going to be critical in just helping support some of that learning by helping ensure some of those activities and things take place at the home. But part of what we want to try to do is minimize and balance the amount of screen time that our kids have with constructive instructional activities. So that's where our families choosing the Jefferson Virtual Academy are going to be critical in helping ensure that those students are successful.
Some questions about turning in documentations for kindergarten students and elementary school students. If you choose Jefferson Virtual Academy, will there be anything physical handed in, or is everything going to be done through Google Classroom?
Right now, we're looking at Jefferson going through the virtual platform as much as possible, just to help try to maintain the health and safety guidance that we've been following through. Obviously, if there are concerns or issues that crop up, we will definitely work with them, and the classroom teacher will be the place to start first and foremost with those. But we are prepared to go to some pretty extraordinary lengths to try to help make sure families are successful in whichever pathway that they choose.
Can we talk about testing? And that's not only our internal tests and quizzes, but our state assessments as well. How will those be administered and proctored for students in Jefferson Virtual Academy?
Each individual teacher for some of the in-course assessments will be done in different ways. Obviously, in the virtual environment, there's a lot of more opportunities to do some things that probably aren't so appropriate, but I'm sure that our teachers will be working with assessments that really look at calculate or determining their success and mastery of the content. And so we're still awaiting guidance as far as our general summative assessment or the state assessment, as most people are familiar with. We're still awaiting what that guidance looks like. We know in the spring that was waived from the federal level, but that is a federal requirement. So we have not yet received that guidance. We do have some meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks from the State Department to determine that. But all in all, we will communicate that out once we get a little more clarity about what those examinations may appear to be. Because some of it is difficult. For example, the SAT is not a state assessment. I mean, we use the scores from that. The College Board is the one that regulates the process for doing that for our high school juniors. So that is something that we will definitely be working with College Board, West Virginia Department of Ed, to try to communicate out what that protocol will be once we get that established.
I did see some questions about students who missed that opportunity earlier this year due to the pandemic. There is information about updated dates for SAT testing now on both of our high school websites. So if you go to jcswv.org and then select a school, just choose your child's high school, and you can see some SAT information there as well for anyone who's looking to find out more about that. Still a bit of, I think, clarity needed, Shawn, as far as blended, and I'm going to, I think, put this into terms that I, as a person without an education background, would understand. It sounds like when you say blended, you can pick and choose virtual and in-person classes. But from what you have said, that's not how the blended option works. It is an option for high school students, and some classes that cannot be provided locally would then be offered virtually. But it's not an a la carte sort of situation.
Correct. We know first and foremost our Jefferson County staff is the best option for families. And so we want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities. And so the only times that we would be stepping outside of that would be if it's in the case of high schools, it would be a situation where it's a higher education course, a college course, or if it's something we're unable to offer. For example, the example given earlier was the Japanese course. With not having a Japanese teacher available to us, we would reach out and partner up with West Virginia Virtual Schools. And so we would want to make sure that those students still continue to have those opportunities, but we would be reaching out to those alternative sources to provide that for. And that's something we've traditionally done the last several years. That's nothing new for Jefferson County, but we've always tried to do that as best we can.
Shawn, to your understanding, have any of the immunization or required health records for different grade levels been waived this year, or are students still going to need to get their physicals and age-appropriate immunizations?
To my knowledge, that has not been waived. Obviously, one of the things you'll want to consider if you're choosing to postpone or hold those, if you're wanting to come on and participate in extracurricular or curricular activities, you would have to have that up-to-date shot records and immunizations as necessary. So you want to make sure that, I would just strongly recommend that you go ahead and make sure you're keeping up with that, just to make sure that if we do suddenly there is big change in and we're able to open our schools back up before the end of the year, you want to make sure that you have that stuff prepared so that you don't have no obstacles to returning to the building if you wouldn't want to.
What's the best way for families to get that information to the school? My understanding is I think all of them have a drop box outside at this point, a touch-free drop box. That
is correct, or you can always scan that information in and email it to the school itself. So both of those options would be available for families.
And they can mail it physically as well?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay, terrific. One of the other questions that I think is really on people's minds is how a student who enrolls in Jefferson Virtual Academy and wants to participate in something like concert band might be able to do that. Do we have those details available yet, or is that just something you're not going to be able to come on and take those classes if you choose the virtual option?
No, we're trying to work out through those options. A little bit of this may be just what is the number of students participating, just like any traditional year and scheduling. If there's not enough students interested, it may be limited. But if there's enough students interested, we are trying to work out to where there are virtual options available. And then, like I said, if there's an actual concert or evening practices, those students that have chosen the virtual option would be able to come after school and participate in those activities.
Quick question, and this one might go back to Ms. Rowan. We talk a lot about devices, laptops, tablets. Someone's asking if a desktop computer would work for this, because I think a lot of people still have desktop units in their homes. Do they need to buy a new computer, or will those work for our virtual academy?
Your desktop computers will work as long as it has internet connectivity. You may want to double check to see if you have a camera. So should you want should your child want to have an asynchronous situation where you have the camera on and a microphone, that you may want to see if a webcam is something that you need. But other than that, desktop computers are great. I'm on a desktop right now.
Is there going to be some opportunity, Jennifer, for parents, especially caregivers who might be assisting with the Jefferson Virtual Academy at home, to learn more about Google Classroom in terms of how to use it? I know you showed us that resource and I shared the link, but do we anticipate expanding that library and offering them some extra assistance where necessary?
I don't see why we could not. We are definitely looking and always looking for ways to help parents and caregivers through this process. So if you have a need, please feel free to email me. And the more feedback that I get about a particular area, I'm happy to provide some more clarity if there is something that you're confused about. So I do encourage people to review the videos that are provided. And then any extra questions, definitely talk to the teacher and the administrator if you need to, but I'm always here as well.
And Jennifer is fantastic at explaining things in a way that even I can understand them. So I promise you'll know what she's talking about. And if you need feedback from us, that's what we've been working on with these FAQs. And Shawn, question in terms of schedules for high school. I know that's something that a lot of people are concerned about right now with some of the uncertainty before that 19th deadline. Are we going to, do we have a target for when they'll be able to make schedule changes if that becomes necessary?
I would encourage folks to go ahead and, if there's changes they're wanting to make, go ahead and reach out to their schools and their counselors now so they're aware of those, because right now they're in the process of revamping all of the schedules because of students choosing the virtual option versus the in-person option. So I would encourage them to reach out now. And I know that shortly after the 19th, the deadline for registering, that schools are vastly trying to get that done as quickly as possible and plan to have completed schedules out prior to starting school. But I would encourage families to reach out now so that they can get some of those changes or modifications potentially made prior to school starting.
I'm seeing an update from Ms. Wolf that September 4th, is that it?
We are planning on having schedules in live grade September 4th, at least to the most part. There may need to be some minor adjustments after that point, but that's the deadline that schools have been trying to reach, is the September 4th for the vast majority of placements. But if you know that there's a change, like if you signed up for band and now during the pandemic you really don't want to be in band, now's the time to reach out to your counselors so that they can get that updated, preferably by August 19th, so we have some good solid numbers to go by.
Are there any issues for families who choose homeschool this year and would like to come back as a Jefferson County school student next year?
The answer is possibly. It depends on the grade level. The answer is we have been, if you've heard the news, we were issued a waiver for this first time homeschool for kindergarten only. So those families that would elect this year to take their student and homeschool them for kindergarten, the requirements that has been traditionally required under state code have been basically given additional flexibility so that the testing and some of those requirements are not in place. However, for other grade levels, that is not the case. So you want to think carefully about choosing homeschool for your kids this year, because it may impact their movement in progress in the school district, especially at the high school level. There's definitely some concerns about the high school level and receiving the Carnegie units required under state code to ensure that they're making progress towards graduation.
Shawn, there's some more questions coming up about masks. As I understand it, we're getting ready to make sort of some updates based on new guidance from the state. Can you talk about the plan for that? And I can share a link here in a few moments about where people can follow our plan as we go.
Yes, we are in the process of updating some of the new guidance that's coming out. But again, what we are strongly doing is strongly encouraging kids to wear masks as much as possible in the school, because we know that's the best and safest way. Obviously, we're following the governor's guidance on children under the age of 9 not having to wear masks, because we know the real challenges of working with children of that age, trying to keep a mask on. But again, if we have parents and families that want to have their children, we'll support that. We think that's a good, healthy option for our students. But again, there are areas in our schools that we will be mandating that masks be worn, hallways being one of those, cafeterias, and common areas that they would be navigating. Otherwise, we will be strongly recommending that they continue to wear the mask throughout the day. But obviously, the big thing is when we can maintain the 6-foot social distancing, those mask requirements can be relaxed a little bit, but we do strongly encourage mask wearing throughout the whole day if possible.
Shawn, you know more about what was some of the work that's been completed over the summer, but there's questions about how that work can be turned in. At this point, is the Dropbox the best way if a student's not going to be returning to in-person traditional learning?
Yes, that's what I would suggest, that they do take that to the Dropbox and drop it off at the local school that they've completed the work for.
You mentioned, Shawn, that there is a chance that homeschooling could impact students' ability to advance. What's the best way for a family to make sure that they're following the right guidelines and that the program they choose will be acceptable? Is there a resource you know of, or a person they can contact?
Yes, Sue Buchanan here at the central office should be able to answer many of those questions for you, or we can also offer up Kelly Wolf here online here with us. She should be able to also help guidance. But Sue is our resident expert in many of the homeschooling questions and scenarios. So they just want to be careful, and I just encourage them to reach out to make sure they have, because there are a lot of nuances and options that they may have that we would just have to walk through with them and help them make the right decision for their family.
And to be clear, no one would be denied the opportunity to return as a Jefferson County school student. It simply might be a matter of what grade they would be in.
Correct, correct, absolutely correct, yeah. And that's what we just want to make sure, if you're choosing to homeschooling this year, we just want to make sure that you're choosing an option that will meet your family's goals, and making sure that the student doesn't fall behind in progress. Again, we're not discouraging that option by any means, because that's a family's choice, but we want to make sure that they don't do something that we can't support them in as far as what state code limits us to do. So we just want to make sure we're familiar with some of the obstacles and rules surrounding advancing in school.
Any word, Shawn, on driver's ed and whether that will be made available to Jefferson Virtual Academy students?
Obviously, virtual school or driver's ed is one of those things that is one of those hands-on types of things, but we do know that the West Virginia Department of Ed does offer a West Virginia Virtual Schools course there, so we do know we have that option available. But again, depending on what the numbers are, we may have an in-person available to support that. But again, that's we will definitely have one of those two options available for families.
I just had a vision of the Knight Rider theme song run through my head, but it dates me a little bit. We still have some students, I think, who are trying to get some personal items maybe out of their classrooms. Are they going to receive information about that?
Yes, I was actually inquired about this today, and you should be hearing from the local schools. They're going to be setting up some times prior to school starting for children and families to come pick up personal items. So that they should be hearing something in the next few days about that.
Right. And thank you, by the way, for everyone's patience. I know that that's something that comes up frequently for them, and everyone has been very gracious about that as we try to ensure that everything is safe and we're ready to move forward. I know that that's not an easy thing sometimes to have up in the air, but you've all been very good about that. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. Let's see. There's questions about, and I think this had actually come up recently, Shawn, the quarantine requirements for a core group if if somebody does go home sick, whether it's a COVID-19 or a COVID-19-like symptoms, what's the protocol for that according to the Jefferson County Health Department at this point? Does a school shut down? Does a core group go home? What's the duration?
Well, and that's a great question. And ultimately, there's a lot of circumstances and issues that will be determining the level of quarantining that occurs. And that's part of why we're endorsing the mask wearing, because the more the mask wearing and the ability to maintain that, the less impact that the number of folks would have to be quarantined. But again, our local health department will be working with us to provide guidance on what students will be required to go on quarantine and what staff would go on quarantine. So I know there's been questions about surrounding the school buses. That is another area that's mandated to wear masks. And part of the reason we're at that mandating that particular area is so that if a student rides that bus, we would minimize the impact of who would have to go on quarantine in the evening. And that's really why we're asking folks to wear masks as much as possible, because based on the initial guidance from the health department, the more mask wearing, the less of the impact of quarantine would be.
I'm getting some questions, people anxious to know who their Jefferson Virtual Academy teachers might be. That will not be available until after the deadline, is that correct?
That's correct, because unfortunately what the reality is we're having to reschedule virtually every single student in Jefferson County right now. So as you can imagine, that's nearly 9,000 students, and people are scrambling, and that's part of what that September 4th deadline is for folks. So there's not a whole lot of turnaround time between the 19th and September 4th, but we are going to try to reschedule everybody and make people aware as early as possible, but it may not be till that September 4th deadline before we can do that.
Yeah, we share everybody's awareness of how tight these deadlines are, but we are working with constantly changing information. It's been impressive to watch how quickly a lot of this has come together, and frankly, the feedback we've gotten from families, from students, from community partners has really helped us stay on top of this and shape some of this. So August the 19th is the cutoff. September the 4th is when the schedules will be out, and we do anticipate that you will hear quickly from schools about orientation opportunities, class supply lists. I'm seeing some questions about that. The sort of things you would expect to be seeing ahead of school will still be there. Everything's just a little bit up in the air right now as we try to determine exactly how many students are going to take the Jefferson Virtual Academy option versus the traditional in-person option. Shawn, I'm looking at if a student forgets a mask, will they be prohibited from getting on a bus? What's the scenario there?
No, absolutely not. We would not prohibit a student from doing that, nor would we ever endanger or risk endangering a student's welfare. Bus drivers will actually be having additional masks and have available masks at in their buses to provide students if necessary, as well as they get dropped off at school and are forgotten from a parent or caregiver, there would be a mask provided for the student as well.
If a student transfers into Jefferson County Schools mid-semester, will Jefferson Virtual Academy be an option for them?
Yes, absolutely. We're anticipating supporting Jefferson Virtual Academy no matter what the circumstances. If things improve or not, we plan to continue that throughout the entire school year.
Shawn, I know that there are still some issues being worked out at the state level, some guidance coming down, but what can you tell us right now about bus transportation?
Bus transportation in large part will continue as the same. Now, they have been working diligently over the summer to recreate the runs to try to limit the number of students on the bus so that we can ensure as much safety as possible. Obviously, with the number of students also families choosing the virtual option, that also limits the number of students on the school buses. But we anticipate that we will not be, I know some of the concerns have been where there are 70 and 80 kids on a bus, and that's not something that we've been working out a lot of details, changing runs and making sure that we're trying to minimize the utilization of each bus to ensure that they're not overcrowded. But a couple of the other things, as we saw in the guidance document, we're going to be asking that siblings sit with one another, and that as they get on the bus, they move to the back of the bus and load towards the front. That way there's as minimal interaction and connection with other students outside their families as possible.
And again, the Jefferson County Health Department has been a great partner in helping us work on some of those guidelines, and continues to help us work through what our process will be to ensure safety, not only as a precautionary measure, but if there is an illness at some point, how we are going to ensure that anybody who might be at risk is alerted appropriately. And they're going to be the tip of the spear on that, and we are going to support them where we can to ensure the safety of staff, students, and our families. That was a big one. Does anybody else have questions to throw in the chat? I know that we've shared a lot of information with you. There are some issues, I'll say, that we've had on a few of the sites with confirmation of Jefferson Virtual Academy registration. I believe that has been corrected. If you are in doubt, you can either email me directly, and I can throw my email address down there, or if you re-register, there's no harm to that. You should get a confirmation email at that point, or if you scroll down on the screen where the form had been, there should be a confirmation statement. Is it guaranteed, Shawn, that a Jefferson Virtual Academy student will have a teacher from their home school?
I can't say with 100% guarantee, but we are going to do absolutely everything in our ability to try to make sure that their schools, they're getting somebody from their home school, and trying to make sure that happens. And again, a large percentage of that's going to be determined by the number of families participating in the virtual environment versus those. But based on the preliminary numbers, we're anticipating that's going to be a strong likelihood that they would see some of their own teachers. But no matter what, it's going to be a Jefferson County staff member.
Right, local teachers, and ideally we'll match up school teachers with the school students. A clarification point for James Rumsey, Shawn, and forgive me if you hit on this, but a question came up. We know that James Rumsey serves Berkeley, Jefferson, and Morgan County, and they are trying to come up with how they're going to work. Will Jefferson Virtual Academy students still have access to James Rumsey, or is that something that James Rumsey is going to have to figure out?
No, they will still have access. We're still working out a few of those details, but no, in talks with the director over there, we are planning on trying to make sure that they're supported in pursuing a pathway at James Rumsey. So those details will be coming out hopefully very soon on the exact way that they will interact with them. But we do strongly encourage them to continue that work, because we want to make sure that they have that opportunity as they move forward in their young lives.
I never want to presume to know the answer to questions like this, so I'll defer to Ms. Rowan on it. But a question about whether or not a student at Jefferson Virtual Academy would be able to complete their work if they had to leave the state for some reason, if their family had urgent business, could they still log in for synchronous learning as well as the asynchronous? Let me unmute you. There we go.
Absolutely, as long as you know what time and you have internet connection. That's the key. You got to have internet connection. So if you're in Hawaii for a week, just remember we're in Eastern Standard Time, and show us great pictures, right?
Yeah, it can be extra credit. I won't speak to the teacher, but do a presentation. Will there be ever a time, Shawn, when Jefferson Virtual Academy students and traditional students are intermingled? Is extra co-curricular after school activity the only possibility for that right now, or is that even a possibility?
That is the only current possibility. I do know some of some of the things we're asking our teachers to do, and I know they did this spring, is obviously an opportunity would be some of the game nights and some of the things that some of our teachers do on the extra side of things, and just doing some different activities and kind of different things online so that folks can get together in that way. But until the safety and health guidance changes, yes, those will be limited for now.
We got a great question, one that I know there's been a lot of work done on the end of our technology department and Jennifer Rowan, but we've talked about devices and making those available for families in need. We have a question about a family that may not have reliable internet service. What are we doing to help address that need?
A great question. We're doing about 4 key different things. So I'll go through all of those. The first one is the state of West Virginia is working with us to put in external access points, which are ways that you can go into the parking lots of schools and use the internet there. So they're working on their deadline for that is September 1st, and I'm hopeful that that would occur before that time. The second way, we are using buses. We are testing buses for putting Wi-Fi out in communities with limited access this week and into next week. We are also partnering with businesses and libraries to provide you a map of places where you can go that they've already said, yes, we are allowing Jefferson County students here. So you should see some information about that coming out. And lastly, we're looking into a hotspot solution for students who may have specific needs. The Board of Education for Jefferson County actually had this deal in 2008 to buy the service for Sprint is really what it is. It's the service, but we have to buy the hotspots, the hardware. So we're looking into that solution, but the way that we work in the technology department here is smarter and not harder. So we are going to pilot it first to make sure it works before we invest a lot of money into that. So we're planning on getting 25 hotspots to see which one is going to be our best fit.
Let me just add a little bit of clarity there for the bus hotspot. Basically what we're doing is putting some devices on, I think 7 buses, if I'm not mistaken, and those will be parked strategically in 5 buses, I'm sorry, in strategic locations throughout the area that are underserved with internet, so that way they could be in their neighborhoods and have that access available to them during specific times of the day. So that's something that we are in the process of completing right now, so we anticipate that will help those communities.
Yeah, and I say 5, we're actually getting 6 buses, but 5 will be in rotation with 6 as an extra for different events or for various areas that we find have more need.
Terrific. Lots of neat options there and outside the box thinking. For students who were in public school last year but choose homeschool this year, will they still have the opportunity to participate in sports or other extracurriculars, and what's the process for doing that?
That's a great question. They'll want to make sure that they're looking at, I believe it is West Virginia Code 18A-1, or excuse me, 18.8-1. That is the homeschooling provisions. There are some restrictions about participating in athletics. They would have to participate in at least 1 virtual course to participate in extracurricular and co-curricular activities. There is some additional restrictions in code surrounding athletics though. And so my understanding is they would have to be, again, we just have to confirm their scenario and their situation, but we want to make sure that there may be some limitations associated with that. And they have to live in the district if they're wanting to participate in athletics.
Will there still be additional supports for gifted students?
Absolutely. We don't anticipate, just like any of our students that have special needs requirements and services, we plan to continue supporting them with gifted services or occupational therapy, physical therapy, whatever, speech therapy. All of those are going to continue whether they choose the in-person or virtual option for their families.
question about teachers in middle school. Will one teacher be teaching all middle school classes for a group, or will the students have one teacher for each subject?
They will be just like they are in a traditional schedule. They'll be moving through different teachers for each subject.
And this is actually a good question because I don't know that it's come up. If a family opted for homeschool but would like to change to the Jefferson Virtual Academy option, is it too late to do that? Or at what point in the school year would it be too late to do that?
We would be happy to accept them at any time, honestly, but the sooner they do that, the better, because that way they'll be able to get that instruction and be up with their peers. We would hate to see them come in and have to try to work very, very hard to catch back up, but we would accept them at any time.
Good question here about dual enrollment and block scheduling and how that might affect A and B block. Any idea how that's going to be handled at this point?
I know that they're trying to get creative with the schedule as far as that's concerned, but much of the dual credit options, because of the COVID virus, are moving to online platforms and online choices as well. So many of our partners and courses, so we don't anticipate any problems with working with our block scheduling because of that shift in their approach this year.
For anyone who keeps score, we had a pretty mild winter last year, which at least for some of us who get superstitious, that means this year we're going to get hit. A lot of questions I'm seeing pop up about what happens with Jefferson Virtual Academy if we do not open physical schools due to inclement weather. And I think it's going to look a little bit different this year because of some changes to the calendar and our new abilities.
Correct. Yeah, both of those will change for us. And so ultimately what we will not have is any snow days in the sense of a traditional snow day. Part of that is related to the calendar change basically issued by the state governor to push us to start at September 8th. We still have the requirement for 180 days of instruction. And the only way to achieve that is to make sure that we have all of the days that are built into the calendar actually instructional days. And so what we will be asking our teachers that are in the in-person classroom is making available resources available in the Google Classroom platform, which they'll be starting and using from the beginning of the year. So it'll be a pretty seamless approach for students to be able to work on some work at home during that day that they would not be reporting to the school building.
And just to add a piece to that, all schools must start September 8th, but we cannot go past June the 1st. So that block is what we have to get those required 180 days. And it's going to take basically we don't have the room at this point to take an inclement weather day. Fortunately, because of the innovation of our technology department and our C&I department and cultural unity and social emotional, we've come up with a plan that I think will allow us to continue instructional days, even if we're all unable, if folks are unable to come back into a physical building. What about clubs, Shawn? We've talked about sports and co-curriculars, but what about things like Key Club or FFA?
Obviously, we're going to try to continue supporting those as much as we possibly can. They're going to be, some of those things are going to have a lot of limitations just due to the current health and safety guidance that we're required to do. Because if they do have meetings and things of that nature, they'll have to follow the same guidance as our regular classrooms with this distancing. And but again, for those families that are out that are choosing the virtual option, they would be able to attend meetings after school hours. The biggest thing is we just don't want them mixing with the pods and classes that are existing in the building during the day.
Will the core group, speaking of core groups, for I guess all grade levels where their core groups are those essentially the only people that a student would see during the day? So if you're in a core group of 20 people in a class, would those be the 20 people you interact with day in and day out? Or would you still be seeing other people?
I'm sure, especially in the secondary schools, much more than probably the elementary schools, you'll still have the opportunity to see some other folks, but as much as possible, we're going to try to restrict their movement, especially early on. I'm sure as guidance continues to change, we will continue to evolve our approach, but right now we're going to continue to follow the the current guidance, which limits the amount of movement and access to other peers at this time.
And because of those guidelines, that is going to change a bit how students are going to be socializing in hallways, et cetera.
Correct. Yeah, we're going to minimize the amounts of times they're in the hallways and able to reach their peers. We know that's not the ideal circumstances, but under the current guidance, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure our students are safe at school.
We talked about our plans for cultural unity, and we got some questions about how we're going to continue that with our virtual school program, Jefferson Virtual Academy. I know that Ms. Tanya Dallas Lewis is working to make diversity training part of our training for all staff. And Shawn, I know you've been working with her closely on that.
Yeah, if she's on here, she may be able to speak more specifically to some of the work that she's been putting together, but we understand that an essential part of our mission is to support all of our students, including our marginalized populations, and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to engage them in person as well as in our virtual environments, and hopefully she's able to speak to some of the work that she's doing.
I don't see her on here right now. I think her internet might have cut out.
So she's having some connectivity issues, and I wish she was on here because she's really the one that's been doing the majority of the work on there. And I don't know if Dr. Ebersol, if you can add anything that you might be aware of that she's working on, because I know social emotional department and Cultural Unity has been working together on some different activities and things, but we want to make sure that, like I said, one of the things we're trying to do is really do some training for our teachers. We have our ambassadors program, so those ambassadors would be available to work with our kids, whether they're in person or in the virtual academy approach. So we're going to continue that work as well as some of the other work that we're doing as we move forward, because we know that there's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns right now in our communities and our country, and we want to make sure that students feel safe and know that they're respected and valued no matter who they are or where they come from.
I know that's been a big priority for us at Jefferson County Schools, and that's going to extend to our traditional students as well as Jefferson Virtual Academy. I know that there are still a lot of uncertainties out there for all of us. This is, I think, and I say this as a parent of two Jefferson County School students now, this is one of the hardest decisions you ever have to make as a parent, and there is no wrong answer. You have to do what is right for you as a parent, and we are here to support you no matter what your decision is, whether it is in-person traditional, whether that is Jefferson Virtual Academy, whether that is homeschooling. You need to do what you need to do, and we are here to make sure that your child is successful no matter what that choice is. We will continue with all of the supports that we can possibly give, and we very deeply appreciate your presence here tonight. I want to be respectful of your time as it is 8 o'clock, and we do have some families and friends probably to get back to. Thank you to everybody who's still at the office. I can see all of you on this call. Go home, get some rest. I'm going to share some links to our website, and I would really, anybody who has questions, ideas, keep them coming, because we need your feedback. We are partners in this. We are partners in education, and it's the only way we remain successful. This has been recorded, as you might notice. It will be posted on our website tomorrow. And yesterday's session was as well. We'll be updating things with our Q&As, our FAQs, and our plans as well as we learn more. We're in this together, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate Shawn letting me be a part of this, and I'll turn it over to you to close things out. Thank you.
Yeah, just much as Hans has said, I want to thank you so much for taking the time this evening and to become further informed about making a very difficult decision for your families. And like Hans said, we are partners in this effort, and we will try to support you in the best way that we can as you move forward in whatever decision you choose. And we thank you for being here this evening, and we'll look forward for you to continue to get additional information in the next few weeks as we get ready to start school this year. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you being here this evening.